All right, ready, guys? All right, right here we got. Just blurt it out, guys. Right here is going to be. This occurs in the light. Oh my gosh. I'm not gonna write that whole thing, right? What goes into the light-dependent reactions? Well, we have the electron carrier NADP+. And what's the low-energy molecule before it's charged? ADP. Plus a phosphate. We're going to attach that phosphate to ADP, turning it into? When we strip off the electrons from water and add them onto NADP+, it turns into? That's an electron carrier. What are those little stacks of pancakes where the light-dependent reactions occur called? Oh, the whole thing is called the gran. Sorry, hold on. That one is the whole stack, so we'll call this a gran. Oh, no, you're right. It's pointing to two thylakoids. And the whole thing is one of the grana. When we split water from light, we split water into oxygen gas. So now what goes into the Calvin cycle? Well, where is this location called? This is called the Calvin cycle. What's another name for these? Light-independent reactions, okay? And what comes out of them? Glucose, right? Yeah. You can either write glucose or C6H12O6. 3 factors: light, temperature, and then the reactants, which are water and carbon dioxide gas, right? How do plants store excess energy they produce? Starch. Think about potatoes, right? Potatoes. Is it ES? Yeah. This is a little Dan Quayle moment right there. Why do most plants appear green in color? Because chlorophyll. Oops. Let me spell chlorophyll right. Chlorophyll reflects green light. Why do they sometimes, forests are the lungs of the earth? Because they That's a pretty. They take in carbon dioxide gas and they release oxygen so that we can breathe in. Function of photosynthesis is to synthesize sugar. You could also put store light energy into chemical energy. We're taking light energy, we put it into a chemical called food. In this case, sugar. Overall equation is 6CO2 plus 6H2O. Gives me 1 molecule of C6H12O6 plus 6 molecules of O2. The reactants. That is the reactants. The products. Those are the products. The location of the light-dependent thylakoid. Thylakoids, specifically their membranes. Right? And their membranes. The light-independent is the stroma. Alright, so let's talk about not photosynthesis anymore. Yeah. We start off with glucose. Glucose turns into what process though? goes through glycolysis. That's the process, right? To produce pyruvic acid or pyruvate. That's what comes out of glycolysis. We make about 2 ATP, right? What's the cycle right here? How many ATP can we come out of, Miss Krebs? 2, that's right. Well, really, what comes out of the Krebs cycle when we're ripping apart pyruvic acid, though? This is where carbon dioxide comes out. And we're loading, we're taking all the electrons from the pyruvic acid, and the electron carriers are going to go to the electron transport chain. What comes into the electron transport chain? Oxygen gas, and it turns into, and we make about 32 of these bad boys, right? For a total of, if I add this plus this, ATP, yeah, good. All right, so cellular respiration, the function for this is to, release energy from sugar to make ATP. Overall equation is glucose plus oxygen gas. Oops, 6 molecules of oxygen gas. Stop yelling at me. Okay. To produce 6 molecules of CO2 and 6 molecules of, oops, why did I say oxygen gas? We're not in the chloroplast yet. There goes the G from sugar. Somebody let that person in. Think it's J. So reactants. Just kidding. Is that PJ? Oh. So reactants right here, guys. It is PJ. PJ, when you take the bathroom pass and you're gone for about 45 minutes, either you have some bowel problems that we need to address, right? Because we have other people here that need to use that pass, buddy.
We're taking notes. So
No, I don't want people like literally wetting their pants in here because you're out doing God knows what. Location of glycolysis. Location is cellular respiration. The mighty. Starting molecule of glycolysis class. What is it class? What do we start with? Glucose. Because it's called sugar. Starting molecule for cellular respiration. So after glycolysis, it splits it into pyruvate or pyruvic acid would work. Pyruvate or 2 molecules of each. Number of ATP producing glycolysis. 2 net. Right? It actually produces 4, but it's only a 2 profit gain, right? Total number of ATP produced in glycolysis and cellular respiration? 36. How are they dependent of other? Right? The reactants of, I'm just going to speak this out, okay? The products of that are the reactants of that. And the products of cellular respiration are the reactants of photosynthesis. What comes out of one goes into the other. Does that make sense? They produce each other's reactants. I like it. Ooh, that's even a better way to put it. The word glycolysis means splitting of glucose or glucose splitting, right? Sugar splitting. What is the difference between aerobic? What does aerobic need? With oxygen. And then anaerobic is without oxygen. So what happens if glycolysis, after glycolysis, if oxygen is present? Where does that pyruvate go? Into the Krebs cycle. Pyruvate enters the Krebs cycle to undergo cellular respiration. Got it? Last one. Bam. What happens after glycolysis if oxygen is not present? It will either go into lactic acid fermentation If you're in a muscle cell or if you're a yeast cell, it'll go into alcoholic fermentation. What is the purpose of fermentation? To allow what process to continue? Glycolysis. Allows glycolysis to continue without oxygen gas present. Two types of fermentation. Lactic acid, right? That's number one. So number one's lactic acid occurs in muscle cells. Number two is alcoholic fermentation, right? That's number two right there. That occurs in what type of cells, class? Yeast. ATP stands for adenosine. Try. Huh? For the purposes of this class, yeast. But it occurs with other types of organisms as well. What are the three basic parts of ATP? Adenine, a sugar, and then 1, 2, 3 phosphates. How does ATP release its energy? Right there, when we break off a phosphate. It releases the energy when phosphate takes off and turns back into adenosine diphosphate. How does an ATP molecule get recharged and turn back into an ATP molecule? We add the phosphate back on. What is the most common type of carbon-based food molecules that are used to provide energy in living things? We call them carbo. Why are proteins rarely broken down and used to produce energy? Because we need proteins to build structures. We need them to build enzymes. We need them to do everything else. I'm not going to start chopping down the walls of my house to make energy unless I absolutely have to. What type of organic compounds do plants store their excess energy? What type of organic compounds do animals usually store their excess energy? Two answers to this. Glycogen, but when that runs out, or, you guessed it, triglycerides, fat. Bam, 13 minutes.